So, hi, I'm here with my friend Steve Gelberg and Nory who I've known for many, many years. We're here in Stockholm at the ICSA conference, and I've snagged them to sit down with me for just a few minutes to check in. Both of them were involved with ISKCON, the Hare Krishna movement. And I wonder if I could ask you, maybe, Steve, to start. You have the copy of your book here. I'd love for you to just tell about your experiences in the group for a minute. And
Okay, well, I was in for 17 years, and it's always hard to summarize that amount of time. But I joined at 18 back in 1970 and left 17 years later, 35. And
what year did you go in?
1970.
And so
1987.
Right. And you're now a professional photographer. You're in San Francisco, and you've
You go on talking.
Yeah, no,
I can learn about myself.
I've always been very impressed with the depth of your knowledge. My understanding is you even went to Harvard Divinity School.
Yeah, well, even while I was in ISKCON, in spite of having 1 year of college, I just had intellectual interests and ended up being the person for the Hare Krishnas who would liaise, is that the verb?
Right.
With the academic community. So
Right.
I would attend academic conferences in religion and basically try to facilitate anyone wanting to do research, from dissertations to books to whatever, on ISKCON. So I had a lot of contact with the academic world. So in some ways I'm not typical in that although I was a fully committed member, I had a little more freedom, personally. And then when I left, the only thing I can think of right off to do was something academic, namely, get a degree or two. So I fortunately knew a couple of the faculty at Harvard Divinity School, who are known as an ISKCON devotee, Harvey Cox and Diana Eck, and they helped me get in there because I had published a few papers and so on.
Right.
They knew me enough to tell Harvard Divinity School he can handle a master's program. So and then generally I'm interested in the whole field of religion, and psychology and this, that, and the other.
And what was your Krishna name? I've forgotten. I'm sorry.
Shubhananda.
And you've written a book. Would you mind holding it up and just... Ta-da.
Yes. India in a Mind's Eye is based on a journal I kept actually while I was still a member, less than a year before I left. And I spent some weeks in India with my wife, and the journal it's part travelogue about India, and part I'm visiting ISKCON centers in India and noticing certain things and having certain doubts and ambivalences. So I'm by that time, 1986, I had begun, the movement had been going through difficult times. The founder passed away in 77. Administratively, things were going bad, and I and many others were trying to reform the movement. And so the book reflects the questions about ISKCON near the end of the career in ISKCON of one member.
And you also wrote something like 17 things you learned?
Well, the thing that's been around the longest is an essay called On Leaving ISKCON, which you can easily find. Just Google On Leaving ISKCON.
I should say it's probably a Nory site.
It's on my website.
Nory Master, we'll get to in a second.
And I wrote it 3 or 4 years after I left, and it was basically I wanted to make a statement, a document of the reasons that I left, which I hope would be educative, instructive, or just interesting to people still in the movement.
I found it fascinating. And Nory, tell us, Nory Muster.
I joined in 1978. I moved in the day after my college graduation from UC Santa Barbara. And I worked in the public relations department doing cover-up for the organization, basically covering up everything that was wrong. Every time they had a crisis, we would go into crisis mode and organize organize press conferences where we would deny everything to the media.
Mm.
He was involved.
Uh-huh.
And so I worked there for 10 years, and then I left at the end of 1988. And I also went back to college and got a master's degree working with juvenile sex offenders and in like a psychology-related field. And then after I got my master's degree, I discovered that there was just rampant child abuse within ISKCON during the years I was a member. And little children that had been little babies when I was a member, little toddlers, had grown up to become abused children. And so they found out about my master's degree and approached me and said, hey, we got to talk to you because we were all abused in India at the boarding schools. And I was shocked. I didn't know anything about it. I was working on my book at that time. I wrote a memoir called Betrayal of the Spirit.
Which I read, which was excellent.
Oh, thank you. That's how we met.
Yes.
Yeah, you contacted me. You're like, hey, I'm at LAX. Where are you?
Yeah, I'm an ex-Mooney, and I
Yeah.
just read your book, and.
Yeah. I think I'd heard of you by then.
Mm-hmm.
So I studied the children, and then I wrote. My publisher asked me to write a book about the children next.
Mm-hmm.
Although it took me 14 years, I did write a book called Child of the Cult, which is what I'm presenting at this conference. And it studies not just ISKCON children, but children from 5 different groups, kind of a spectrum of groups: the Unification Church, Children of God, Hare Krishna, Transcendental Meditation, and Aesthetic Realism. So I'm going to be reading excerpts from that today.
Excellent. And you have a website, Surrealist?
Yeah, surrealist.org.
Uh-huh.
And I thought about getting betrayalofthespIrit.com because it's still available, but I thought that's so negative, betrayal. So I just...
Even though you felt you were.
Well, I felt I was, but more, I think the title relates more to the organization betraying the spirit of Krishna.
Right.
And I was, as a kid, I was always interested in mystical things and all that, and I'm probably more of a realist now, but at the time I wrote the book, I felt really strongly that I just wanted to reform the movement, and I thought they would like my book, but I was wrong.
Right.
They didn't like my book, and I got the evil eye every time I went to a temple, and I knew they had thugs, so I just thought, well, who cares? I don't want to fix it anymore.
And you knew they had thugs, so it's interesting comments.
I did in the review in the research for writing my book. I was able to get interviews with some of the really the criminals that were in the movement that spent jail time in after doing their drug dealing to raise money for the organization. And so they all opened up to me and told me. In fact, one of them, who was one of the leading drug smugglers, wanted to read the sections to make sure I got it right, because one of the drug dealers had died of an overdose, and he was in contact with that man's mother, and he wanted to be able to give her the book so she could understand what her son had been through. So he read the book just to make sure I got all the details right, and it was a really complicated scheme, the drug dealing, how they organized it. So I was able to get a lot of inside information and just put it out there publicly. I thought the organization would like it, but they didn't.
They didn't appreciate it.
They didn't appreciate it.
So, and Steve, you have a website for your photography?
Yes. It's www.StephenGelberg, my name altogether, .com. And I'm a black and white film photographer, darkroom, old school photography. And I do what I call fine art photography.
It's beautiful.
Landscape portraits and various subjects. And that's been very engaging.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So I want to just ask, I mean, I've been following the Krishnas since I left the Moonies in '76. So, I mean, I remember Stephen Bryant being killed, the ex-member. I remember the West Virginia Temple with Keith Ham. Bhakti, was it, what was his? Yeah. I was actually on a TV show with him when he was presenting himself as Jesus, and literally, and I said, I don't think Jesus sold hash oil or something. I made some
that
type
was Laguna Beach that sold the hash oil.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
In any case, it was, I've met a lot of people who've been very harmed by ISKCON over the years, and most recently I met somebody socially who said, I was in the Krishnas, and read Combating. He said it brought up a lot of painful memories for him. But I guess I'd like to have any comments you care to make about what the status of the group is right now, or for anyone who's, on a spiritual search, wondering about, what place may be healthy or not, if you have any personal words of wisdom or advice, anything.
Well, there is a difference between core religious ideas and values and individual institutions.
Mm-hmm.
There are Christian churches that are nourishing and sincere and spiritual, and there are others that are murderous,
Right.
and that's true in every tradition. There is a Krishna worship tradition in India which is perfectly legitimate, but it was really introduced to the West in cultic form, which is not necessary to
Introduced by Bhaktipada.
by the founder, Swami Bhaktivedanta.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever the original intent of the movement was, it really kind of grew into a very high control, totalitarian environment. And a lot of people got hurt because the individuality was really downplayed in favor of an abstract notion of a spiritual identity, and people were neglected as people, and worst of all, for women. In the doctrine, women are explicitly inferior to men, and just terrible attitudes about women.
Well, their brains are smaller, I remember.
There's so many silly ideas, but that's one of the most tragic aspects of it. It certainly is not especially a bad place for a woman, because women are not respected.
And I remember transcendental trickery of a fundraising type with the...
Right, well, there's a general attitude that the ends justifies the means. There have been forced softening of some of the programs because they got in a lot of trouble. But the attitude that, Krishna's God, and one way or another we need to get the word out in the books and make money.
Yeah.
So there's questionable ethics, certainly.
Also, the organization, because of the child abuse that happened, we helped the children start a lawsuit called Children of ISKCON versus ISKCON, in which the children were successful in suing. The organization had to go into bankruptcy to be able to, deal with it. They didn't want it to go to court, so they just immediately went into bankruptcy protection, and they settled in favor of the children. And so I think that's another thing. It's sort of forced them to change, and they say they have safeguards in place now to help protect children and report incidents of abuse to the authorities, and deal with internal issues like that. So I think some things have changed, but the basic things, that it's an authoritarian organization, that the gurus, are you can't question the philosophy. They have a thing now.
Isn't speculation a sin or something? Speculation.
Yeah, you're not supposed to question. Although they say now, they did a presentation yesterday where they said that there's more latitude in questioning the guru, but you can't question the philosophy. Like if you question it, then they'll explain to you why you're wrong and the philosophy is right.
Oh, it's a doctrine over person.
It's very...
And demand for purity.
It's pretty strict.
Yeah, and I think that point, he overplayed that point about
that
that's
he's a little overly optimistic.
All right to correct the guru. As is taught in the Christian movement, the guru is, infallible virtually. They don't use that word, but there are other terms indicating that this is not somebody that you debate with, not somebody you question. And if he says something that sounds strange or unacceptable, then you have to figure out how you're not getting it. And so, in the end, it is like other totalitarian groups that say, this is absolute, you've got to believe it, you need to submit to it.
Yeah.
And it really ultimately, in my view, is a really anti-humanistic organization in terms of just, as you said, valuing the institution and spreading the word, over the well-being, the psychological
Well,
and
getting
other.
money over everything else. I
Yeah.
think.
Right. Yeah. So, any last words as we wrap up? I'm really grateful for your
I
willingness
think
to.
you have to be in control of your own life. You have to be the captain of your own ship.
Mhm.
Don't get involved with an organization that tells you what to do.
Mm.
And you have to have a connection with your gut, because your gut has brain cells in it, and it will tell you
That's
when
true.
something's wrong.
Mhm.
And I would also say, there are a lot of seekers out there. Every younger generation, youth is the time to question and to wonder and to figure out what am I and what is my place in the world. And to preempt that personal search by joining a group that tells you we have all the answers and you don't have to really think anymore because just read these books and it's all there. That really preempts the individual's right to create their own life.
Right. True. Thank you so very much.
You're
I
welcome.
hope to see you again soon.